My mother looked across the table at me and said, "Renee, we love you, but you are not in a position to help right now." There were 6 people at that table: my Aunt Carol, my brother Marcus and his wife Dana, 2 of my mother's friends from church, and me, the one who had just driven 2 hours to be there, the one who had spent the last 14 years doing their taxes, filing their paperwork, and answering every phone call that started with, "We have a situation." Word. I sat there and I did not say anything. I looked at my water glass. Someone scraped their fork on their plate. My mother kept talking, explaining to the group why the family's financial plan going forward would not include my input. Why Marcus would be the one managing things. Why, as she put it, I had enough on my plate already. What I had on my plate was a number I had found 3 weeks earlier in a bank statement I was never supposed to receive: $91,400. That was not a number I put in a family account. That was not money I authorized. That was money that had been leaving my paycheck, slowly, automatically, invisibly for 9 years, redirected into a joint savings account I thought had been closed in 2015. It had not been closed, and the withdrawals never stopped. The envelope that started all of this was sitting in my home office in a folder with a yellow sticky note on it that said, "Do not bring this to dinner." Wait, I waited, but I had already made copies. If you have ever been the strong one in a family that only called when they needed something, and you have never once been thanked for it, stay with me. This is going to take a while. And it is worth it. The version my family told people was simple. Renee is independent. Renee is fine. Renee does not need help. What they meant was, Renee does not complain, so we do not have to worry about her. I grew up in Spokane, the older of 2 kids. My brother Marcus is 5 years younger than me, and from the time he was about 12 years old, he was the one my mother watched, with this particular kind of hope in her face. He was funny, loud, quick to make people laugh. He started things: a lawn care business at 15, food cart at 22, a catering company at 28. He never finished any of them. But every time one ended, my mother would explain it away. The economy, a bad partner, timing. Meanwhile, I got a degree in accounting, passed my exams, worked for 7 years in estate accounting at a firm downtown, and then moved to healthcare staffing payroll because the salary was better. I was not exciting. I was not the story anyone told at Thanksgiving. I was the one who filled out the forms when my grandmother died, who noticed the error on my parents' tax return in 2016 that saved them $400, who drove to Salem, Oregon to pick up documents for my mother when her first attorney retired and mailed the wrong files to the wrong address. I did not expect a parade. I expected to be seen. There is a difference. My mother's line, the one she used for years, was, "You have always been the strong one. You don't need what he needs." I heard that so many times I started to believe it. Strong people do not need things. Strong people manage. Strong people do not sit at a dinner table and say, "Actually, I do need something too." So I managed. I had my own checking account, my own savings, my own retirement contributions at work. I was careful with money in the way that people are careful when they grew up watching their parents not be careful. I tracked everything. I had a spreadsheet I updated every 2 weeks when my paycheck hit, which is why, in March of last year, when a number did not match, I noticed it immediately. I do not usually check old email accounts. I had a Gmail address I used in my 20s that I kept active for maybe 3 or 4 subscriptions I had never updated. I logged in to cancel one of them and found an email forwarded from Glacier Falls Savings Bank. I almost deleted it. I thought it was spam, but the last 4 digits of the account number in the subject line were familiar. I stared at the screen for a moment. Those were the last 4 digits of a joint account my mother and I had opened in 2012. It was supposed to be an emergency fund, my idea actually, where we each contributed a small amount monthly in case something happened to my father. He had a heart condition. I wanted a buffer. My father passed in 2017. I assumed the account had been closed after we used part of it for funeral costs. I never received another statement. I stopped thinking about it. The email was a monthly e-statement. I clicked through. The balance was $4,000 and change. There were 3 withdrawals from the previous month. None of them were mine. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. My coffee went cold. I did not move. I read the statement 3 times. The withdrawals were made via ACH transfer. They did not have memo lines. They went to 2 different routing numbers I did not recognize. One transfer was for $1,400. One was for $1,200. One was for $1,600, $4,200. In 1 month, bursting. I went into the account portal and looked at the transaction history. The bank allowed me to pull 12 months back. Then I called Glacier Falls directly and asked them to mail me a complete transaction history on the account since it was opened. Ooh. They asked me to confirm I was an authorized account holder. I was. My name was still on the account. The printed statement arrived 8 days later in a large envelope, with the bank's return address in the corner. I opened it at my kitchen table, with a cup of coffee I actually finished this time. I printed a second copy. I got a yellow highlighter. And I started from the beginning. Would you have said something that night at dinner? Or would you have waited like I did? Leave a comment below. I want to know. The account was opened in June of 2012. For the first 2 years, the deposit history looked the way I expected it to look. My mother put in $150 a month. I contributed $200. The balance grew slowly. Then in 2014, the deposits changed. My contribution went from $200 a month to $400. I did not remember agreeing to that, but I pulled my own bank records from 2014 and checked. There it was, a recurring ACH pull from my personal checking at Spokane Community Bank, exactly $400. Starting in September of 2014, the memo line said, "Fam Savings." I had set up that transfer. I remembered it now. I had increased my contribution because Marcus had lost the catering contract, and my mother called me in a panic. I told her I would put in more for a few months until things stabilized. The transfer never stopped. I kept reading. In 2015, the withdrawal pattern started. Not large amounts, 200 here, 300 there. I would not have noticed them if I had been checking the account casually. But on paper, in a printed 9-year history, they formed a line. And the line went in one direction. Out. My mother's deposit stayed at $150 a month through 2017. Mine increased again in early 2018 to $600 a month. I had no memory of authorizing that increase. None. I pulled my complete bank records from 2018. ACH transfer, $600 monthly. Fam Savings. Set up for my account. I checked the IP address log that Glacier Falls provided. They include that in extended account histories for fraud review requests. The change to my contribution amount in 2018 was made from an IP address in Spokane Valley. I live in the South Hill area of Spokane. My mother lives in Spokane Valley. I set the printout down on the table and looked out my kitchen window for a while. I was not angry yet. I was in the part of auditing a file where you are just counting. You do not react. You count. I requested an extended fraud review packet from Glacier Falls, which gave me access to IP logs, ACH origination records, and any contact history on the account. It cost me $65 and took 12 business days. While I waited, I started building my own spreadsheet: column A date, column B deposit amount, column C deposit source, column D withdrawal amount, column E transfer destination, column F notes. The spreadsheet ran to 214 rows. When the fraud review packet arrived, free, I matched the ACH origination records to the withdrawal destinations. 2 routing numbers appeared repeatedly on the withdrawal side. I ran them through the Federal Reserve's public routing directory. The first was a business checking account at Pacific Northwest Commercial Bank. The second was a personal account at the same institution. Both accounts were opened in Marcus Calloway's name. I confirmed that by cross-referencing with business filing I found on the Washington Secretary of State's public database. Marcus had registered an LLC in 2016, Callaway Culinary Group, with a listed commercial bank account. The routing number matched the first one in the Glacier Falls withdrawal history. I sat back in my chair. The money was not going to an emergency fund. The money was going to Marcus. I looked at the spreadsheet again. From 2015 to the end of last year, 47 transfers had gone from the joint family savings account to those 2 accounts. I added them up 3 times because the number felt wrong. $91,400. Not all of it was my money. Some of it was my mother's contributions. But I went back and calculated my share based on the deposit history, $63,800. That was the amount traceable to my automatic contributions over 9 years. I closed the spreadsheet. I saved a backup copy to a thumb drive and put it in my work bag. Then I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring. She sounded cheerful. She asked if I was coming to Sunday dinner. I said I was not sure yet. She said Marcus had news to share. She said the family was excited. She said that was wonderful. Suitor, if you have ever done the unglamorous work in your family, the taxes, the paperwork, the phone calls nobody else wanted to take, and been told later that you were not really contributing, these stories are for you. And there are more of them coming. I found out what Marcus's news was from my Aunt Carol, who called me the following Tuesday to remind me about Sunday dinner and mentioned, in passing, that Marcus and Dana had put an offer on a property in Coeur d'Alene, a cabin on the lake. I asked how he was financing it. Carol said Beverly had co-signed. I kept my voice completely even. I asked if Beverly had mentioned how she was showing assets for the cosign board. Carol said Beverly had told the lender she had a family savings account with a healthy balance as proof of supplemental income and asset reserves. I thanked Carol. I got off the phone. I looked at the Glacier Falls account balance from the most recent statement, 4,000 and change. That was not a healthy balance. That was what was left after 9 years of slow, methodical withdrawal. But the account was a joint savings account that had, at its peak in 2021, held over $30,000. My mother had apparently used account statements from that period to show the lender what the account was capable of holding. I do not know if she told the lender the money was no longer there in full. I do not know if she told the lender whose contributions had built that balance. I do know that she never told me any of this was happening. The Sunday dinner was 6 days away. I called a former colleague from my estate accounting years, a woman named Patricia, who now worked in financial compliance at a law firm. I did not ask her for legal advice. I asked her to look at my spreadsheet and tell me if I was reading the origination records correctly. She called me back the next morning and said, "Renee, you need to talk to a bank fraud specialist before you say a word to your family." I said I had an appointment on Thursday. She said, "Good, and whatever you do, do not close that account before then." I had not planned to. Evidence disappears when accounts close. I learned that in my 3rd year of estate work. I kept the Thursday appointment. The fraud specialist at Glacier Falls was a woman named Sandra. She met me in a small conference room near the back of the branch. I brought 2 printed copies of everything: the full transaction history, the ACH origination records, the IP address logs, my spreadsheet, and a 1-page summary I had written the night before that laid out the timeline. She read through it quietly. She did not say much. At one point, she turned to page 4 of the transaction history, looked at the 2018 ACH change, and looked up at me. I said I did not authorize that change. She turned back to the page. She made a note. Glitter. Sandra told me that the account change in 2018 had been made via telephone banking with a knowledge-based authentication, meaning someone called in, gave my social security number, my date of birth, and my mother's name as the secondary account holder, and requested the contribution increase. The call had been made from a Washington state area code. They could flag the call record if I wanted to open a formal review. I said yes. She also told me something I had not expected. There was a secondary linked account on the Glacier Falls profile, not the family savings account. Another one, a money market account, opened in my name in 2019. I had not opened a money market account in 2019. The account had a balance of approximately $9,000. It had been funded via transfers from the joint savings account. The transfers were small, 500, 300, 200, and irregular enough that they would not have triggered an auto alert. The account had been set up with an email address I did not own, a slight variation on my real email, a number added at the end. I looked at the account paperwork Sandra printed for me. The signature on the account opening form was not mine. I looked at it for a long time. It was close. Whoever had signed it knew how I write my capital R, but the loop on the lowercase n was wrong, forms, and the Y at the end of Callaway dropped too far below the line. I pointed that out to Sandra. She was already writing it down. That was the moment I stopped treating this like a family misunderstanding and started treating it like what it was, fraud file. I was good at those. Sunday dinner was at my mother's house in Spokane Valley. She has a dining room she uses for holidays and special occasions, a long table, the china she got from her own mother, cloth napkins, the whole setup. Marcus and Dana arrived before I did. My Aunt Carol was already there. 2 women from my mother's church circle were in the living room when I came in, and Beverly's friend from her book club was helping in the kitchen. I had not brought the folder. I had the thumb drive in my jacket pocket. I had the bank's contact number saved in my phone. And I had taken photographs of every page in the fraud packet, which were backed up to 2 cloud accounts. My mother greeted me at the door with a hug. She smelled like her lavender hand lotion. She told me I looked tired and asked if I was eating enough. I said I was fine. We sat down. Marcus was in a good mood. He talked about the cabin, about the lake view, about the structural inspection that had gone well. Dana kept touching his arm. Beverly kept smiling. At one point, my mother said with real warmth in her voice, "I am just so proud of what Marcus has built." I ate my green beans. I did not say anything. 40. About 40 minutes into dinner, my mother made a small announcement. She said she wanted to talk about the family savings account because she had decided to close it and redistribute the balance toward Marcus and Dana's new property. She said it had always been a family account, and Marcus was starting a new chapter and it was what the money was for. She looked at me when she said it. Not long. Just a glance. I said, "Mom, how much is in that account right now?" She said approximately $4,000. Marcus said it was more. We used some of it for my restaurant costs a few years back. I said, "How much more?" Beverly said, "Renee, let's not do this right now." I said, "I want to understand the balance history. I'm on the account. I think that's a reasonable question." Marcus laughed. Not a mean laugh, more like he was trying to cut the tension. Here she goes. Always with the audit voice. I did not respond to that. I looked at my mother. She said, "The account has been used for family purposes over the years. That's what it was designed for." I asked if she could tell me what the total withdrawals had been since 2015. She said she did not have that number in front of her. I said, "I do." Nobody moved. Marcus stopped tapping his water glass. Dana looked at Beverly. My Aunt Carol set her fork down. I did not yell. I did not even raise my voice. I said, "I requested a full transaction history from Glacier Falls 6 weeks ago. I also requested an extended fraud review packet. I have been through every line of that account since it was opened in June of 2012. Beverly said, "Rennie, this is not the time or alert." The total amount withdrawn from that account between January 2015 and February of this year is $91,400. I said it the way I would say it in a client meeting, flat, clear, specific. 47 transfers. The primary destination accounts are registered to Marcus Calloway personally and to Calloway Culinary Group LLC. Marcus said that account was for the family. I am the family. I said you are, and so am I. Which is why I also pulled the deposit history. My contributions, through automatic ACH transfers from my personal checking account for $63,800 of that total. Beverly said, "You agreed to those contributions." I said, "I agreed to $200 a month in 2012 and an increase to $400 in 2014. The increase to $600 in 2018, I did not authorize." I have the IP log from Glacier Falls showing the change was made by telephone from a device in Spokane Valley. My Aunt Carol said very quietly, "Beverly." Beverly's hands were on the table. She was not looking at me. She was looking at her water glass. I continued. There is also a money market account opened in my name in 2019 that I did not open. The signature on the account paperwork is not mine. The contact email on the account is not mine. The account currently holds approximately $9,000 funded from the joint savings account. Sandra at Glacier Falls has flagged it for formal fraud review. Marcus said, "You went to the bank before you talked to us?" I said, "I am an authorized account holder. I have every right to do that." Dana had not said a word. She was looking at Marcus. One of my mother's church friends said she was going to get more water from the kitchen and left the room. The book club friend followed her. Marcus leaned forward. He said, "Rennie, you are making this into something it is not. That money was for all of us. You were always the one who could handle it. You never said anything." I said, "I didn't know there was something to say." He said, "Can we not do this in front of everyone?" I said, "You announced the cabin purchase in front of everyone." Beverly said, "After everything we did for you." I said, "Mom, I need you to stop right there. Because what I have in front of me is a document trail, not a feeling. And the document trail does not support that sentence." She stopped. Carol was crying quietly. I had not expected that. I looked at my mother. She looked older than she had at Christmas. She was gripping the edge of the table. I said, "I'm not doing this to humiliate you. I did this because I found evidence of financial fraud connected to my name and my accounts, and I have a legal obligation, and honestly a personal one, to address it. The bank fraud review is already open. The money market account in my name is already flagged. What happens next is not something I can control. Beverly said, "You are going to destroy this family." I said, I didn't build the account that destroyed it." In the 6 weeks after that dinner, the following happened. Glacier Falls completed its formal fraud review and confirmed that the 2018 telephone authorization for the ACH increase did not match my verified voice patterns or my typical account access history. They escalated it to their fraud division and sent a formal notice to both account holders. The money market account in my name was frozen pending identity verification and investigation. The balance, $9,200, put into a hold status. It is still under review. Marcus and Dana's cabin purchase fell through. Beverly had listed the joint savings account on the mortgage application as a demonstration of family asset reserves. Team. When the bank's mortgage team received a notice from Glacier Falls about the fraud review, a standard process when an account used in loan documentation is flagged, they pulled the application for additional review. The lender ultimately declined to proceed with Beverly as cosigner given the open fraud review on the account. Marcus called me 3 times. I did not answer. He texted once, "I hope you are happy." I did not respond to that either. My Aunt Carol came to see me in person, about 3 weeks after the dinner. She sat at my kitchen table. She said she had known for a while that things with the account were not quite right, but that she had not wanted to get involved. She said she was sorry. I told her I appreciated that, and I meant it. "She is not who hurt me," Beverly called me once. She said she had only done what she thought was best for the family. She said she did not think I would miss the money because I was always so careful with everything else. She said she was sorry if I felt betrayed. If I felt betrayed is an interesting phrase. It makes the feeling contingent. Like the betrayal only exists because I named it. I told her I was not angry at her for loving Marcus. I was only going to be honest about what the records showed. She said, "You were always so cold." I said, "I was always so accurate." I filed a report with the Washington State Department of Financial Institutions because the account involved forged identity documentation, my name on a fraudulent account opening form, and because the telephone authorization change in 2018 had been flagged by Glacier Falls as potentially fraudulent. Filing was not optional at that point. It was the correct thing to do given what the records showed. The family business Marcus had been running, Callaway Culinary Group, technically still active as an LLC, was flagged in the DFEI report as the destination of funds from a potentially fraudulent financial arrangement. That opened a separate state-level inquiry into the business account activity. I did not engineer any of that. I filed what was accurate. The records did the rest. I want to pause here and ask you something. If your family had been using your money for years, quietly, methodically, counting on you not to notice, would you expose it publicly or would you walk away quietly and let it go? Leave your answer in the comments. I read them. And your answers matter. I still live in Spokane. I still drive to work on the same route. I still update my spreadsheet every 2 weeks when my paycheck hits. A few things are different. I closed my account at Spokane Community Bank and opened a new one at a different institution. New account number. No joint holders. No automatic transfers I did not set up myself. The automatic ACE pull labeled FAM Savings, the one that had been running since 2012, is gone. My paycheck now deposits fully into accounts I can see and control. I get a monthly statement from Glacier Falls on the fraud review status. The case is still open. These things move slowly. I knew that going in. My mother and I have not spoken since the dinner, not because I am refusing, because she has not called. I think she is ashamed. I think she has probably told people a version of this story where I am the one who did something wrong. That is her right. I have the paperwork. Marcus sent one final message about 2 months after the dinner. It said, "I just want you to know that I never thought of it as your money. I thought of it as family money." I read that twice. Then I thought about the 9 years I worked overtime during tax season, the drives I made, the forms I filed, the calls I took at 7 in the morning, the time my father was in the hospital in 2017, and I was the one who handled the estate paperwork while my mother sat with Marcus in the waiting room. I thought about the Saturday afternoons I did not spend with my friends because I was on the phone with my mother's CPA, untangling something Marcus had done with his business filings. And I thought about the Sunday dinner where she looked at me across the china and the cloth napkins and told the room that I was not in a position to help the family. She said I was too poor to help. She was right. I had been funding them for 9 years. One last thing before I go. If something in this story made you want to pull out a bank statement, check an old account, look at a beneficiary form, or read a document someone told you not to worry about, trust that feeling. Every lie leaves a paper trail. You just have to know what you are looking at sicker if you know what that feels like. And come back. There are more stories like this one, and they all end the same way, with proof.